With Medarot 4, the story of Iki Tenryou was over, and at the same time, the Game Boy Color was approaching the end of its life, with a new handheld taking its place. Natsume was already hard at work on a brand new Medarot game for the Game Boy Advance, featuring a different cast of characters and a different combat system. But at the same time, they were also busy with something else. The final entry on the 8-bit handheld. Medarot 5, the transfer student of Susutake village, was released in December of 2001, as usual split into Kabuto and Kuwagata versions. And if that date sounds a bit late, well, you're absolutely right, because by the time this game was released, Navi had already been out for a couple of months. Medarot 5 takes place in the same world as the previous entries, but Iki is no longer the protagonist. The story now follows Koishimaru Tensan, a young schoolboy whose family work situation forces them to move to a new place. You could say that he became the transfer student of Susutake village. Koishimaru just got a brand new Medawatch, which he admires while waiting for the bus to take him to his new school. Here he meets one of his new classmates, Yamato, and together they go to get his little sister, so that they can all go to school together. But on the way to Yamato's house, disaster strikes when a pair of assholes push them into a pool of liquid crap, transforming the two into fart elementals. Koishimaru has no choice but to zombie his way back home, while Yamato dashes at the speed of brown light. After showering old school style, he has a sad discovery. His brand new Medawatch is broken. Still, life goes on and he rushes to the bus stop again, only for life to punch him in the face once more as he finds out that the next bus isn't coming for another hour. Here you get a choice. You can wait for the next bus, or you can try dashing full speed to school. Regardless of what you choose, Koishimaru ends up getting a ride from Michio, a local taxi driver. At school, he introduces himself to the class and gets asked important questions, such as if he has ever flipped a girl's skirt. Yamato isn't around, however, so he decides to pay him a visit. On the way there, he meets Yamato's little sister. There have been rumors that some ghosts have been causing problems, and it seems that they bullied her and caused her to lose her balloon. Koishimaru enters the giant tree to get it back, and he notices something on the floor. It's a Medawatch, loaded with parts and a medal, but no timpet. However, he conveniently finds one up on a branch. The fun quickly ends when a boy called Hiko appears and accuses Koishimaru of being behind the ghost problem. He challenges you to a battle, and this is where you get your first partner. Kuwagata version starts you off with Shinzan, a melee Medabot with a sword and a hammer, while Kabuto version starts you off with the range-focused Crotogel that explodes stuff with bullets and missiles. Before the two can start their battle, however, the real ghosts show up, and so does the new referee, jumping in out of nowhere, on the branch of a giant tree. After driving the ghosts away, Hiko leaves and Koishimaru is left discussing what happened with his new partner, who technically isn't actually his, and so begins his adventure, filled with doubts about what to do. Surely he will have to give the Medawatch back at some point, right? What will happen to their relationship when it's time to return it? And what the hell is that shady bastard even doing? Between the Susutake village mayor being a doofus and the sinister plot involving the production of fake medals and parts, Koishimaru finds himself as the professional leader of the school's new Medarot club, and rumors of a big fancy tournament have been floating around, and naturally the club is going to get involved somehow. Once you get past the pretty friggin' long intro, it's business as usual. You have problems to solve and plenty of new and only new Medabots to collect. No walking condoms this time though, you won't see the Rubber Robo gang in this game. Medarot 5 finally takes place in a different setting. I like Omikuchi Town as much as anyone else, but after 4 games, it's refreshing to get away from the urban areas and explore the comfy countryside village of Susutake. Welcome to the rice fields, Medarotter. This also means that you have a new cast of characters taking the spotlight, so Medarot 5's story is standalone and doesn't require previous knowledge. But rest assured, Iki hasn't been erased out of existence, and the game occasionally references past events. The same can't be said for Hikaru Agata, the former world champion who initially got Iki started on his journey, and the long-forgotten protagonist of Medarot 1, whose name is not once mentioned in the game, only his alter ego, the Phantom Renegade. So long, old friend. At least you're in English now. There's also a number of story choices you can make, which slightly alter certain events. There's only one ending, mind you, but this adds a nice bit of player agency and replayability. Yes, Medarot 5 has a truckload of dialogue. The communication system from Medarot 4 doesn't return, but both starter Medabots do have their own personality and an active role in some parts of the story. As for the entire list, there's 158 completely new Medabots. And for better or for worse, that's all you get here. Not a single one returns from the previous games, not even Metabi and Rokusho. I'm sure that some people found this disappointing, but there's a lot of good designs in here, some that are obvious analogs to older designs, and some that don't take cues from any predecessors. And speaking of good, I'd like to bring your attention to how good this game looks and sounds. Every map, menu and background is filled with details, so much so that it's almost overwhelming and would make some early GBA games hide their faces in shame. We have reached peak Game Boy. We are on Mount Everest and it's all downhill from here. The music is also pretty high up there, which should be no surprise at this point, with James Banana once again delivering a banger of a soundtrack. It's a game that looks really well polished, and that generally extends to the gameplay, which has been streamlined from its predecessors. As you might know, a Medabot's body is composed of 4 parts. They are separated between male and female, which require a male or female timpet, but otherwise it's free game as to what parts you equip on your Medabots, all the way from a full set of matching parts to a hideous monstrosity. The legs determine how well it performs on different terrains. The arms grant it abilities to use in combat. The head also has its own abilities, but they have limited ammo, and the Medabot shuts down if it is destroyed. Each part has its own stats, and will remain active as long as their armor isn't brought down to 0, at which point they are destroyed and cannot be used. The arms in particular have a charge and a cooldown, which determine how long it takes for the Medabot to go from the starting point to the center of the arena where it takes action, and then back to the starting point. At the core of it all is the medal, which is the heart and brain of the Medabot. Each one is aligned with a certain type of part, and has a personality that determines what enemies it targets in combat. Medarot 5 introduces leader skills, which are unique to each medal and are unlocked after being selected as the leader in 100 battles. These provide various passive bonuses to the entire party, which are always in effect as long as the Medabot equipped with that medal is in the leader position. Medaforce also makes a return, sort of. It has been replaced with Meda Skill, which functions pretty much the same, but charges with regular attacks and can only be used once per battle. Each medal can learn 3 Meda Skills as they level up, and once the gauge is full, you can spend it to unleash a powerful ability. The medallion system has been removed, and Medarot 5 refers to the older system where every medal has every proficiency available at all times. Besides that, the system functions the same. Use parts of a certain proficiency, and slowly that proficiency's level will grow, increasing damage dealt. Another new mechanic is combos, a rock paper scissors kind of thing that grants you bonuses based on what parts you use in combat. Each part is rock, paper or scissors, and rock beats scissors, paper beats rock, and scissors beats paper. During battle, the side to beat the initial hand first gains a combo level, and the hand is replaced. From there on, the side with the combo level can trigger various effects by simply attacking. What effect is triggered depends on the part's proficiency and the current combo level, which goes up every time you use a part of the same hand or one that beats it, up to a maximum level of 10. In total, you have 100 possible effects, with a different one for each combination of proficiency and combo level. The ones you've seen before can be referenced in a chart even during combat, and they can be very useful at times, so you should keep them in mind. Or maybe don't, because 99% of the time it doesn't really matter. Most battles are over too soon for it to make a difference, and even then all it takes to derail any effort at reaching higher combo levels is for a single enemy to use a part that counters your hand, immediately resulting in the level being reset to 0. Not all effects are useful or even helpful for that matter, with the NG effect straight up resetting the whole thing, as if to tell you to forget about it. The game also has a decent amount of team battles where the second and third slots are taken by other characters, and you only control the leader, so that's yet another reason why combos simply aren't reliable enough to be worth thinking about. You also have to use specific parts to trigger the effects that you want, discouraging you from customizing your party to your liking. You can also throw the leader skills into the pile, since the effects range from pretty useless to pretty friggin' useful. The starter medals are an example, with Kuagata increasing critical hit chance, and Kabuto increasing damage every time your party gets hit. And of course, they are also the very first medals you get, which further discourages you from experimenting because 100 battles is kind of a lot. Realistically, the only combo level you will get any use out of is level 1, which as it turns out triggers a double success rate bonus for all proficiencies. So yes, the most easily accessible effect is also one of the best, since critical hits can result in the player cheesing an otherwise tough battle. These mechanics had potential, but they needed some more time in the oven. Which is something that applies to Medarot 5 in general, because the further you go, the more it starts feeling like it was rushed out the door. The final parts of the story have some pretty sudden developments, but then the credits roll with a bunch of plot threads being left unanswered. You also get a decent bit of dialogue from your medals early in the game, but after that you'll be spending hours without a single peep from them. There's a bunch of unused maps in the game's data, and the ones that are used seem like they have a lot of stuff packed into them, but it's not actually accessible. The game also suffers from bugs that prevent the player from completing their collection of parts and medals without cheat codes. Why did this happen? Well, think back on the date I gave you at the start of the video. December of 2001 was 9 months after Medarot 4 was released, which isn't too far off from the time between Medarot 2, 3 and 4. But you know how this game has a brand new world with a lot of fancy graphics and a truckload of new character and Medabot designs? Yeah, combine that with Navi also being in development, and yeah, maybe 9 months just wasn't feasible. Of course, Medarot 5 probably didn't get just 9 months of development. It must have been in pre-production for at least several months prior, and you also have logistics and stuff to worry about. There's a hint that points to 2 separate teams working in tandem, and that hint is how the protagonist of Navi is mentioned, but as Kasumi Shinonome instead of Kasumi Asano, which is what he's called in Navi. Given that this game was released after the series got an entry on a brand new system, I suspect that the developers were forced to cut their losses. Makes sense to go for the new hotness rather than a system on its last legs, doesn't it? In fact, there is some exclusive content that can only be accessed by playing the game on a Game Boy Advance. Never mind how this is kind of a dick move, but I'm left wondering if the developers hadn't considered remaking the game for the new handheld. Whatever the case, it is what it is, and all I just said is purely conjecture. What isn't conjecture is that Medarot 5 is the end of the Game Boy era. This was the last new mainline entry developed by Natsume. There was the remake of Medarot 2, and then there was whatever this is. After that, the series was put in a self-inflicted coma until 2010, when Delta Arts took command for a few years before kicking the bucket. As for this Natsume, they still sort of exist after merging with another company, now under the name Natsume Atari. No, not that Atari. Though I'm not sure if that would be better considering that you take one look at their website and it's immediately obvious that their focus is on pachinko bollocks. The publisher Imagineer continues to exist, having published many games under their subsidiary Rocket Company. These include later Medarot games, the most recent example being the Medarot Classics compilation, which features ports of the classic games with a couple of improvements, and also improper attribution for the code they took from an open source emulator. Either way, make no mistake, Medarot 5 is still a good game worth playing. But it's a good game that got castrated before it could become a great one.